Hey all, it's Starzy, and today we are going to do the stay-at-home book tag. So I actually posted on Twitter a while ago. Somebody tagged me in book tag so that I have an inescapable excuse to do them, which I think is why Penny tagged me in the, what was that one I've just done? The books you've never heard of tag. But before that, I did have a couple of people comment on that Twitter post being like, consider yourself now tagged in this. Like, I'm not sure that's entirely what I meant, but I guess I'll take it. So, with that being said, we have Jules to thank for this video because she's the one who suggested this. And it's still relevant because we're still at home. There's still weird things going on in the world. Although Australia is actually starting to loosen its restrictions, so I think they're currently hoping that things will start being relatively normal by July, but we'll see how things go. That being said, we're gonna get right into the tag and see how we go. So, first prompt is laying in bed, a book you could have read in a day. Alright, basically any graphic novel I've ever read in one day. Other things I can specifically remember are, I'm pretty sure I read Fangirl by Rainbow Rowell in a day, which is one of the only YA contemporaries I've ever enjoyed. Also, I mean, honestly, just a lot of YA books because they're often just easy to get through. I don't know, I read the entire Hunger Games trilogy in 2 days. Yeah, there's a lot of books I've read in one day. If I'm not doing anything and I'm really into a book and it's like an easy, quick book, I'll probably get through it in a day. I think also like The Queen of Nothing, I think I read in a day. There were other books I think I read in a day in January, but I don't remember which ones. But yeah. Graphic novels and YA particularly are easy to get through in a day for me, generally. Alright, snacking. Guilty pleasure book. Alright, I'm going to go for A Court of Mist and Fury for this, the second book in the Court of Thorns and Roses series. Because I really didn't like the first book. The end was interesting, but otherwise, Court of Thorns and Roses took me at least 2 years to read. So, but then I got to the second book, and I really enjoyed the second book. And I didn't think it was like the best book ever necessarily, but it was just really enjoyable, and we really appreciate that kind of like sexual tension. So if I have to, I don't like the term guilty pleasure because I don't think people should feel guilty for just enjoying things they enjoy necessarily, but if we're gonna pick something for that category, I think that's what I'd go with. Netflix, a series you want to start. I think I'll go with Mistborn by Brandon Sanderson because I've never read anything by Brandon Sanderson before, and he's one of the main authors that's always talked about when it comes to adult fantasy, and obviously adult fantasy is a favorite, you know, fantasy is a favorite genre of mine, so I feel like I should read him. And I also do have the Mistborn trilogy on my e-reader and have for years, but I just haven't read it. I technically did go to start it last year, but then it was October. I committed to myself that I was finally going to read It by Stephen King in October, so then I didn't end up getting around to continuing it. So I'm sure there's lots of series if I really think about it, but that's what we're going with. Deep Clean, been on your TBR for ages. You know what, I'm just going to insert a photo here, I think, of my TBR shelf, because basically majority of the books on there have been on there for many years. If it's not something that was in my book haul, it's probably been there a long time. If there's anything on there that you think that I should really prioritize reading, let me know. Animal Crossing, a book you recently bought because of hype. Although, I have to point out, Animal Crossing I did not buy for the hype, I have to point out, because that's what this question is suggesting. Animal Crossing, I have been playing the games for many years. I think I started on, I don't remember what the game I started on was called, but it was back on my DS. And I've played, this is probably the 4th Animal Crossing game I've played. But I feel like I'm getting slightly off topic there, but Animal Crossing is basically the reason I bought a Switch last year in the first place. But, so here's the thing, I don't actually buy books very often in general. And so if I do buy a book, like, I haven't really bought books often because of the hype either, necessarily. If I have to have an answer for this, I guess I'd go with Crescent City by Sarah J Maas, but I didn't actually buy it because of the hype. I bought it because I've read pretty much every Sarah J Maas book up to this point, and I was interested to see what she did with this new adult fantasy series. It's also the only book that I've bought this year in general, I think. So, productivity, a book you learned or had an impact on you. So a book you learned from or had an impact on you. I'm actually gonna go with The Life-Changing Magic of Tidying Up by Marie Kondo. Because I have always been someone who's had a hard time letting go of things, which obviously leads to accumulating way too much stuff. And especially, you know, when it got to the point, especially where I was going to be moving out of home a few years ago, you know, transferring a lot of stuff can be problematic. And I do still have a lot of stuff, I have to admit. So it's still a work in progress. But a few years ago, after reading that book, I did feel inspired, and it did motivate me to declutter a lot. I did get rid of a lot of stuff, including old clothes, and before I moved, I think I got rid of like 2/3 of my books. Like, so if we're going for something that has actually made an impact on my life in some way, it did help motivate me to declutter stuff. I mean, it wasn't the only thing. I was also watching a bunch of decluttering videos and stuff around the time, I think, but all the same, yeah. And in terms of learning things, like, there are so many history books I've read, and pretty much everything I read during uni, but yeah. Also a lot of philosophy books, in terms of like, things you've learned in a big way, like, but anyway, we'll go with that before we get too complicated. FaceTime, a book you were gifted. I'm gonna have to go find something on my shelf that was gifted. I'll come back to that. Self-care, what is one thing you have done recently to look after yourself? Things I've done to look after myself. Actually getting up every day, making myself presentable and showering most days. I mean, that seems like a really basic thing, but with the way things are and not having had much of a purpose, like, simple things like that can be difficult, but then they do make a difference. And also, it might be a bit of a silly thing to, it might seem like a bit of a silly thing to some in terms of taking care of myself, but I mean, over a month ago now, I dyed my hair, which, the reason I'm specifically mentioning that is because earlier this year, my mental health was the worst it's ever been, basically, and my self-esteem was wrapped up in that, and I had been hating my hair for months. So when I dyed my hair purple, it actually did make a genuine difference to the way I was feeling. And then just generally day to day, I've been trying to stay busy and productive. So I've been making art, I've been making videos. I haven't done it for a while, but I was streaming, and you know, I've been doing things to try and stay purposeful, feel like I'm still putting stuff out into the world. I'm still doing something. It doesn't feel like I'm just sitting around doing nothing, because that's what I go crazy if I'm just sitting around doing nothing and feel like I'm completely purposeless. Yeah, that drives me crazy. So yes. Bonus, name a book coming out soon. There's a Riley Sager book coming out this year, I think. Is it in June or July? I can't remember what it's called. I want to say Home Before Dark. I could be making that up. We'll see. But it's Riley Sager's meant to be coming out with a thriller this year. And I read all 3 of Sager's thrillers last year and really enjoyed them, and it was my first dipping my toes into thrillers in general. But now I enjoyed them all enough that I basically want to read anything else that they come out with. So that should be coming out at some point. I need to go find a book that someone gifted me. Alright, I don't actually really receive books as gifts anymore. I think the last time I remember receiving any books was probably my 21st birthday, and some of those I've gotten rid of since then. But looking at my shelves, something I know definitely was a gift for a birthday, even before my 21st, I think. So it's been on my shelf a long time and I still haven't read it. But I remember a friend gave me this. So Dreamcatcher by Stephen King, I'm pretty sure, was something that a friend gave me for a birthday many years back. I think I actually started reading this at one point and never continued it, but now that I have read a couple of Stephen King's books, this is something I should really go and get to, especially since it's those covers that, you know, this also shows how long ago I was given this book, because they would have bought this when these were the covers that were in store, which it's really depressing that they're not anymore, and I know people try and collect them, but I have one of them. Yes. All being said, that should be the end of the tag. Let me know what you've been doing at home to keep busy and keep sane and all of that kind of stuff. And yeah, Stazzy out.